We always hear people say things like, I still have to get up for work in the morning. So what difference does it make? Fair question. What difference does it make? Why pursue the truth? Why does it even matter? Simply put, it changes us. The transition is as dramatic as the leap from adolescence to adulthood. It's legitimately paradigm shifting. It liberates us from all of the dead weight that feeds on our energy, such as our pride, our ego, and our biases. Once we find the humility to let it in, the truth lifts us out of the funk that most of us aren't even aware we're in, until after our eyes have been opened. We still take in the same information, we just view it differently, and start asking questions that we didn't know needed to be asked. The knowledge we gain organically refocuses our priorities, and the distractions that once mattered to us lose their importance. By improving our powers of perception, it improves our ability to identify and discard the things that don't matter. We learn how to compartmentalize the information that's pertinent to our understanding, while rejecting the garbage that isn't. It essentially silences the noise of this world. We're able to effectively make sense of the nonsensical parts of our lives that hold us captive. We begin to see the absurdity of deception and develop a love for the truth. And once you develop a love for the truth, it really does make you free. But the most important thing to remember is that the door is never closed to us. We simply have to want to walk through it. Answer me this. Do you know anybody who has ever truly won a debate or conceded in a debate? Those of you who may claim that you have are surely in the minority, because debate, by its nature, is not a healthy platform for discussion. It's a battleground, where two egos fight desperately to outwit each other. Since the goal of debate isn't to understand your opponent, but to win the debate, then where's the room for growth? It perfectly highlights the futility of clinging to an opinion. The correct opinion is no opinion. We're allowed to have personal convictions. However, one of the harshest lessons that one must learn is that our convictions are ultimately worthless if they aren't grounded in reality. The problem with having a conviction based on subjective opinion is that everybody else has their subjective opinions too. So what makes yours more authoritative than theirs? Where's the value? Well, besides subjective value, there isn't any. Furthermore, opinions are a source of endless contention. Two people who submit to the authority of the objective truth can see eye to eye, because there is only one source of objective truth, whereas two people with a difference in opinion can never see eye to eye, because they submit to the authority of their own version of the truth. The key word here is pride. And pride has no dog in the fight other than itself. It's self-consumed, and therefore its only concern is with its own preservation. It has no concept of compromise, and therefore lacks the capacity to concede or empathize. Similar to the truth, it only exists to serve its own interests. However, unlike the truth, pride has an insidious will of its own. But it risks nothing, and therefore there are no stakes in pride. And since it offers nothing, it costs nothing. And that which costs nothing is worth nothing. In a word, pride is easy. Truth, on the other hand, requires us to give up everything, and that is why it's worth it. There's a theory in contemporary culture that claims there's only one way to define truth: science. But this claim is a prime example of a half-truth, because it's only partly true. It presents itself as an absolute, while ignoring the variables that prove that it isn't. It's a dangerous mindset to maintain too, since it undermines our accountability. Ultimately, we're in control of our own perceptions, but we often overlook what influences our perceptions. When all is said and done, we are what we consume. So if you're going to exalt the field of science as your final authority, which in its present state is nothing more than a borderline religion centered around the worship of man, then you leave yourself wide open to attack, since men are fallible at best and predatory at worst. Rigid empiricism has its uses, but there are metaphysical realities that contemporary science still can't account for. The power of prayer and the placebo effect, for example. And because it can't explain them, it denies them, despite widespread testimonies. There's a selective blindness in the mainstream scientific community that effectively renders it unreliable. Most of us know instinctively when something doesn't add up. What hinders us is our dependence on academia. It bullies inquiring minds into not asking pertinent questions, and that conditions them into distrusting their instincts and avoiding the essential lines of inquiry that safeguard them against deception. It's even gotten to the point where it's viewed as a shameful thing to question the status quo. You're considered an idiot if you don't blindly trust what you're expected to believe. And that is a major, major red flag. If we can't question something, then how are we supposed to verify it? Skepticism is our friend, not our enemy. Unlike us, the truth doesn't need to outsource. The truth acts as its own representative, and therefore doesn't require a defense. It always stands up to scrutiny, and therefore doesn't fear investigation. It may not have a will of its own, but it wants to be found. It's far bigger than we mere mortals, so we can only respect it and be receptive to it. Our receptivity is rewarded with discernment. And having discernment is like having an internal radar that continuously refines our ability to detect falsehood. It equips us with the invaluable skill of being able to distinguish what's true from what's almost true, which is handy, considering that half-truths are often indistinguishable from full truths. If somebody's diddling the facts, we need to be able to catch the subtle clues that give their game away. Otherwise, we're susceptible to their trickery. The key word here is nuance. Half-truths are far more dangerous than outright lies, because they either omit or conceal vital details while posing and passing as the full truth. Therefore, our discernment needs to be fine-tuned, since there are telltale signs that only a trained eye can detect. We need to take every thought captive and run them through this internal filter of ours, assess and reassess every angle, and scrutinize everything we believe, see, and hear with a fine-tooth comb. And whatever doesn't stand up to scrutiny deserves to be exposed and mercilessly discarded. Initially, we're beyond reproach with regards to our ignorance. However, once we've been warned, one thing that we can never say is that we haven't been warned. And if we have the tools required to protect ourselves against deception, does it not stand to reason that we should use them? It's like taking a peek behind the curtain and learning how a magician prepares his tricks. We all know that he uses sleight of hand and misdirection, and that he doesn't really possess magical powers. But we suspend our disbelief for the purpose of entertainment, or whatever. However, once you see with your own eyes that he's just a man, the illusion dies, and with it, so does his ability to deceive you. And the inherent implications here are what frighten people off. Everybody's desperate to control their own little pocket of reality, so when we're presented with information that threatens our self-appointed authority to define our own truths, and by extension our own realities, most people run in the opposite direction. They literally flee from the truth. They prefer falsehood because it's comfortable and convenient and doesn't demand that they relinquish their control. Whereas the truth defies our self-appointed authority. It literally pries our eyes open and forces us to accept evidence that bursts the comfortable, little bubbles that we choose to live in, and destroys our cherished, albeit contrived, worldviews. Once our eyes have been opened, it's impossible to unsee what opened them, and that thought and what it implies terrifies people. Understandably, nobody wants to find themselves in that position, but we can rest assured that our boldness will always be rewarded in the end. Confronting the possibility that you've been lied to is truly an act of bravery, because the truth does hurt before it heals. We're more than welcome to bury our heads in the sand, but frankly, that's an act of cowardice, and an affront to the people issuing the warnings to us. Honestly, there are no downsides to seeking the truth. It's low risk, high reward. We lose nothing of real value, and stand to gain a monopoly over our own minds. You can't put a price on that. So what say you? Are you bold enough to peek behind the curtain? I hope so, because we all owe it to the truth. It doesn't coddle us and tell us what we want to hear. It tells us exactly what we need to hear, and that is the purest expression of love.